My name is Brittany Anderson, 32 years old. The Anderson family dining room has always felt less like a place to eat and more like a stage one, where I was perpetually cast as the unremarkable extra. The crystal chandelier above the table refracted light across walls lined with abstract art worth more than most people's homes. The silver cutlery gleamed. The wine was older than my career, and the air reeked of quiet judgment, masked as refinement. Tonight, the table seated 12. My parents at the head, my 3 siblings and their spouses along the sides, and me, the one who had somehow become both the outsider and the invisible thread that still tied us all together. Marcus, my eldest brother, swirled his glass of Cabernet with the exaggerated care of someone performing sophistication. So, Brittany, he began with that signature smirk, still doing that little tech thing in Seattle. I cut into my overpriced steak and smiled politely. Yes, still in Seattle. My company's doing well. Company Victoria, my sister snorted. She'd already had enough wine to drop the thin veneer of charm. You mean that app thing? What does it even do again? We develop AI solutions for financial forecasting, I said evenly. Oh, how cute. Mother cooed, her tone soft but sharp enough to cut glass. That sounds complicated. Patricia Anderson had mastered the art of the dismissive compliment, a tone so perfectly balanced between curiosity and condescension that it could make a Nobel laureate feel like a toddler with crayons. My father, Richard Anderson, didn't even look up from his phone. Speaking of business, he said, his voice carrying the authority that once made entire boardrooms go silent. I have an announcement. He placed the phone down like he was laying a crown on the table. Anderson Holdings is expanding. We're acquiring 3 new properties downtown. Total investment, $40 million. The table erupted in synchronized flattery. Congratulations, Dad. That's amazing. You're a genius. I sipped my water watching the performance. My family had always been fluent in applause when it benefited them. Dad leaned back satisfied. This expansion will cement Anderson Holdings as the premier real estate development firm in the Pacific Northwest. Victoria raised her glass. To Dad, the man who built the empire. I lowered my gaze to my plate, the reflection of the chandelier dancing in the surface of my water glass. For a brief, strange moment, I felt like a ghost haunting my own family. Then quietly I spoke. If you need additional funding, I could help. The laughter didn't start immediately. There was a pause, a stillness, and then the table erupted again. Marcus nearly choked on his wine. You could help. I have some capital available, I said, keeping my tone neutral. I could invest $300,000. Victoria laughed so hard her earrings swung. $300,000, Brittany. This is a $40 million deal. Your contribution wouldn't even cover the legal fees, Marcus added. Mom smiled that same patient, poisonous smile. That's sweet, darling, but this is serious business. Not something you'd understand. Dad finally looked at me for the first time that evening. Brittany. I appreciate the gesture, he said, his voice calm but cutting. Really? But we don't need your pocket change. The phrase hung in the air like the echo of a slap. Pocket change. Something in me went very still. I set my fork down carefully, aligning it perfectly with the edge of my plate. I see, I said softly. Victoria tilted her head, emboldened by the laughter in the room. No offense, Em, but you're playing in the kiddie pool. We're in the ocean. Victoria Thomas murmured, the youngest and always the peacemaker. Come on. No, let her finish, I said. My voice was quiet, almost gentle, and that made it all the more unsettling. Victoria smirked. You make apps. We build empires. Mom nodded approvingly. Exactly. Everyone has their strengths, sweetheart. Yours is different. I picked up my phone. Oh, are we boring you already? Victoria sneered. Just need to send a quick message, I said, typing calmly. My thumb hovered for half a second before I pressed send. Message sent. David withdraw all backing from Anderson Holdings effective immediately. Authorization code Brittany 7734. Execute after their 7:00 p.m. board meeting begins. I placed my phone face down. There, I said. All done. Dad cleared his throat, continuing as if nothing had happened. As I was saying, this expansion represents 30 years of work. Relationships, reputation, results. You can't just buy your way into something like that. Even with a $300,000 check, Mom added lightly, as if she'd just solved the problem of my existence. I smiled. Of course. The irony in the air was so thick it could have been sliced like the steak in front of me. Victoria leaned forward, glassy-eyed and venomous. You've always been like this, Brittany. Always trying to insert yourself where you don't belong. Remember when you begged Dad for a position after college? Thank God he said no. I remembered. I also remembered graduating top of my class from Wharton, while Marcus barely scraped through his state university degree and still got his vice presidency. Yes, I said. I remember. Dad nodded curtly. That was the right decision. You needed to build your own thing. I did, I said. Mom's tone shifted polite finality. And we're proud of you, dear. But let's not mix family dinner with business talk. Of course, I replied, folding my napkin neatly. My phone buzzed once quietly. No one noticed. Dad continued. The financing is tricky, but we've secured strong backing. Institutional money, not. He hesitated, glancing at me. Not hobbyist funding from a coffee shop startup. Victoria smirked, satisfied. Exactly. I looked at them, my family laughing, drinking, congratulating themselves, and felt an odd sense of calm. The table sparkled under the chandelier. Forks clinked. Wine poured. Dad was still talking about capital structure, Victoria about her social calendar, Mom about her charity gala. No one noticed the clock ticking towards 7 p.m. No one except me. At exactly 7:02, Dad's phone rang. He frowned, declined it, continued talking. It rang again. He declined it again. Maybe you should answer that, I said softly. It's fine, he muttered. They'll leave a message. The phone rang a third time louder. He snatched it up. This better be important. I'm at dinner. We all watched as his face changed, irritation melting into confusion, then panic. What do you mean withdrawn? He barked. No, that's not check again. All of it. That's impossible. Who authorized? He fell silent, listening. The color drained from his face. Mom's fork clattered onto her plate. Richard, what is it? He hung up slowly. Our primary investor just withdrew $180 million in funding. Silence. Victoria's wine glass trembled. That's everything. Dad's phone began ringing again. Marcus's too. Then Thomas's. I picked up my water glass, took a slow sip, and said softly, Seems like the tide's changing. The silence after my words was deafening, like the air itself had frozen between us. Then, as if on cue, chaos erupted. Phones buzzed, chairs, scraped voices rose. The elegant dinner setting that had once symbolized control and power now looked like a battlefield. Dad stood abruptly, pacing behind his chair, his face pale. That doesn't make any sense. We have binding contracts, call Bill. Get him on the line, now. Marcus fumbled with his phone. I'm calling legal. Maybe it's a technical glitch. Victoria clutched her wine glass as if it could anchor her to reality. It has to be some kind of mistake. No one just pulls that kind of funding overnight. But I could see the truth settling in behind Dad's eyes. That rigid jaw, the tremor in his hand, as he adjusted his cufflinks, he was terrified. Mom's voice cracked. Richard, say something. Tell me this isn't serious. He ignored her. Bill, I just got word our capital partner withdrew their full investment. Yes, all of it. That's not possible. What Pacific Northwest Ventures? He frowned. Who the hell are they? The name landed on the table like a bomb. No one had heard it before except me. Victoria blinked rapidly. Pacific what? Dad lowered his phone, scanning our faces. They were our primary investors. Apparently they've backed out. Completely. I looked down at my plate, pushing aside the half-eaten steak. That's unfortunate. Dad's eyes snapped to mine. Unfortunate, Brittany. This is catastrophic. Marcus's phone started ringing. Then Thomas's. The sound overlapped into a chaotic symphony, shrill, urgent, relentless. Thomas answered first, his voice shaking. Hello. Wait, what? No. That can't be right. Anderson, Holdings accounts are frozen. Since when? He turned to Dad, horror written across his face. They've already notified the banks. Mom clutched her chest. Oh my God. Victoria slammed her glass down. Red wine splattering like blood across the pristine white tablecloth. Who does that? Who just withdraws $180 million? Dad grabbed his phone again, muttering under his breath. Pacific Northwest Ventures. Who are you? The chandelier above us swayed slightly, its crystals clinking like nervous laughter. I leaned back, folding my hands calmly in my lap. Maybe they had their reasons. Victoria spun toward me. Oh, don't start acting like you know anything about real business, Brittany. I didn't say I did, I said softly. Just that reasons always exist, even for things that seem sudden. Her eyes narrowed. You're enjoying this, aren't you? I met her gaze unflinching. Why would I enjoy watching my family panic? Marcus looked up from his phone. Dad, every investor is calling me. They're asking what happened. It's spreading. Dad's voice was taut. Tell them nothing. Buy time. But the calm CEO facade was cracking. His forehead glistened, his voice caught between fury and disbelief. Richard, Mom whispered, How bad is it? He didn't answer. He was already dialing another number. I glanced toward the floor-to-ceiling windows. Outside, the night was serene, the city lights glittering like distant stars. Inside, the empire was falling. Mom turned to me suddenly. "Brittany, please, stop sitting there like you're watching a play. This is serious. Do you even understand what's happening?" I nodded, perfectly. Dad slammed his phone on the table. "Damn it!" The sound made everyone jump. They said the decision was final, effective immediately. Pacific Northwest Ventures is restructuring their portfolio. Restructuring, Marcus repeated. That means they're redirecting capital somewhere else. Who would they pull from us for? Dad didn't answer. He was breathing hard, nostrils flaring. "We'll fix this. I've been through worse." But I knew he hadn't, not like this. He prided himself on control, on always being 3 steps ahead. But tonight he was grasping in the dark, and I'd turned off the lights. Thomas, now frantically typing on his tablet, murmured, "This isn't just a withdrawal. They're unraveling every tie. Credit lines guarantees everything. It's a full extraction." Victoria pressed a shaking hand to her temple. "This can't be real. Pacific Northwest Ventures can't just vanish with all our funding. There have to be regulations." "They can," I interrupted quietly. "If the contracts allow for immediate liquidation under certain triggers." Dad's head snapped toward me. "And how would you know that?" I read things, I replied smoothly. "Financial articles, case studies. The markets are unpredictable lately." He stared at me like I'd just spoken a foreign language. Mom reached for his hand, her voice trembling. "We'll find a way. We always do." For a moment, I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. Then Marcus's phone buzzed again. He glanced at it and went pale. "Dad, Bill from the bank says their office got a call from Pacific Northwest Ventures' legal team. They're asking about our account status." Dad's jaw tightened. "Why would they?" "They're preparing to reclaim their assets," I said simply. The room went still again. Victoria glared at me. "You seem awfully confident about all this. How do you know so much about what they're doing?" I smiled faintly. "I told you I read." "Read," she snapped. "You sound like you're enjoying this. What kind of person enjoys watching their family suffer?" "A person who's been taught to sit quietly while her family mocks her," I said, my voice still soft but laced with steel. "Maybe silence becomes its own kind of revenge," Marcus muttered. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said, setting down my glass, "every empire falls the same way from arrogance." Dad pointed at me. "That's enough. Whatever petty resentment you're holding on to, let it go. This is bigger than you. We're losing everything." I tilted my head. "And yet you told me I wasn't part of this family's business. Remember?" His mouth opened, then closed again. For the first time in my life, Richard Anderson had no words. The room filled with sound again. Overlapping phone calls. Desperate whispers, the hiss of Victoria lighting another cigarette by the window despite Mom's protests. The scent of smoke mixed with the aroma of steak gone cold. Thomas looked up from his tablet. "Dad, there's something else. Pacific Northwest Ventures isn't just withdrawing funding. They've been investing across multiple divisions under different subsidiaries. They practically own parts of our properties." Dad frowned deeply. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying they've been with us longer than we realized." The chandelier above flickered a brief dimming of light that felt almost poetic. I reached for my phone again, checking the screen. A new message. "David, withdrawal complete. Board meeting in chaos. They'll realize soon." My reflection glowed faintly in the glass calm, collected, almost detached. Brittany, Mom said shakily, "Do you know something about this?" I looked up. "What would I know?" I asked innocently. "I just make apps, remember." The sound of my father's phone vibrating cut through the silence again. He answered, voice hoarse, urgent. "Yes, what?" "No, that's not possible. Who authorized?" "What do you mean, undisclosed majority partner? There's no—" He stopped mid-sentence. His expression changed. Fear. Real, unfiltered fear. "Pacific Northwest Ventures," he said slowly, as if the words themselves had weight. "They've been backing us for 5 years." Thomas blinked. 5 years. That can't be right. Victoria shook her head. "We would have known. That kind of capital doesn't just appear." Dad turned to us, eyes wild. Apparently it does. I sipped the last of my water and stood. "If you'll excuse me," I said quietly, pushing my chair back. "Where are you going?" Mom asked, her voice trembling. "Back to Seattle," I said. "I have work tomorrow. Unlike some, I still have a functioning company to run." Brittany, Dad barked. "Don't you dare walk out right now." I paused at the edge of the room, my hand on the doorframe. "You're right," I said, turning slightly to look at him. "This is serious business. You taught me that." "You?" And with that, I left them phones, ringing voices, rising the chandelier, trembling overhead like it might finally fall. Behind me, I could hear my father shouting orders no one could follow. In front of me, my phone buzzed again. David. They're trying to trace the ownership of Pacific Northwest Ventures. Should I stall them? I smiled faintly as I walked into the cold night. Yes, let them dig. By the next morning, the Anderson estate was trending on every business feed that mattered. Words like collapse, mass withdrawal, and insider panic flashed across the screens in sleek fonts, accompanied by a single chilling headline. Who is Pacific Northwest Ventures, and why did they just cripple Anderson Holdings? I didn't have to wonder who was behind it. I was eating breakfast in my Seattle apartment when the first news alert appeared. The sunlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, glinting off the rim of my coffee mug. I watched the chaos unfold from a distance, each notification a small echo of the storm I had quietly created. By 10 a.m., my phone started ringing. It wasn't David this time, it was Victoria. I let it ring 5 times before answering. Brittany. Her voice was a mixture of fury and fear. You've seen the news, right? Everything's falling apart. Dad's been on the phone since 6 a.m. The banks are panicking, our investors are pulling out, and no one can even find Pacific Northwest Ventures in any database. It's like they don't exist. I took a calm sip of coffee. That must be difficult. Difficult, she snapped. Brittany, this is catastrophic. You're in finance. Don't you know anyone who can figure out who they are? I might, I said evenly. But information like that comes at a price. Price. Are you serious right now? I'm always serious, Victoria. There was silence on the line and then the sharp click of her hanging up. I set the phone down and exhaled slowly. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about control. When I arrived at the family mansion that evening, the air was heavy with tension. Reporters were camped near the gate, their cameras flashing as my car passed. Inside, the grandeur that once intimidated me now looked fragile, like an elaborate illusion waiting to crumble. The dining room where the previous night's war had begun had become a crisis command center. Laptops, printouts, and coffee cups covered the table where fine china had been. My father stood at the head, red-eyed, but still trying to project command. Brittany, he said when he saw me. Good, you're here. Victoria was pacing near the window. Marcus was on the phone, whispering urgently. Thomas was typing furiously, his laptop surrounded by stacks of papers. Mom sat silently in the corner, clutching a mug she hadn't touched. Is this about last night's investor issue? I asked, as if I hadn't been watching every move from my phone. Dad rubbed his temples. We've identified the entity that withdrew. Pacific Northwest Ventures. They're ghosts. No official website, no public filings, no board records, but they've been with us for 5 years. 5 years, Brittany. How does a company with that much influence stay invisible? Maybe they don't want to be found, I said. Dad's eyes narrowed. You know something. I can tell. I smiled faintly. I might have read about them. They're one of the most private investment groups in the region. Very selective about who they work with. Marcus ended his call. I've been reaching out to contacts at every major bank. No one's even heard of them. They're not supposed to, I said. Pacific Northwest Ventures isn't a public firm. They operate through shell companies and intermediaries. Most of their transactions never touch open markets. Victoria stared at me. How would you know that? Financial research, I replied smoothly. It's what I do. Dad's expression darkened. This isn't research, Brittany. This is inside knowledge. Before I could answer, Mom spoke for the first time. Can someone please tell me what's happening? Are we ruined? Dad hesitated. If we don't secure new capital in a week, yes. Victoria groaned. A week. No one's going to touch us. Everyone's terrified of crossing Pacific Northwest Ventures. Lawrence from Hrick's Capital literally told Dad that working with us now would be career suicide. I tilted my head. Lawrence Hendress. Dad blinked. How do you know him? Everyone in finance knows of him, I said. He's cautious. If he's pulling back, that means Pacific Northwest Ventures has reached far beyond your circle. Marcus slammed his phone onto the table. This is insane. One company can't just destroy 30 years of work. Maybe not one company, I murmured. Maybe one person. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Victoria's eyes narrowed. What did you just say? Nothing, I said, recovering quickly. Just that the structure might be centralized. Some firms are built around a single majority investor. Thomas's typing paused. Actually, that would make sense. I've been cross-checking property filings. Pacific Northwest Ventures shows up everywhere, but always in small percentages through subsidiaries. It's like they've been quietly building control for years. Dad turned to him sharply. How much control? Thomas swallowed. A lot. Enough to hold influence over most of our key properties. The Morrison Building, the Riverside Complex, even the Harborview Apartments, all partially owned by PNV through shell entities. Mom gasped. How could we not know? Because I said softly they didn't want you to. Dad's gaze snapped to me. Brittany, you keep saying they like you know who they are. Do you? I met his stare unblinking. Maybe. Maybe isn't good enough. Before he could continue, Marcus's phone rang again. He put it on speaker. It's Lawrence, he mouthed. Richard came, the steady voice from the other end. I'm calling to confirm that Hicks Capital will not be providing bridge financing. Your reputation is toxic right now. Lawrence, please. This isn't personal. Pacific Northwest Ventures doesn't pull funding without reason. Until you resolve whatever you did to them, no firm will touch you. But we didn't do anything, Dad insisted. Then find out what they think you did, Lawrence said flatly. And soon. The call ended. The silence that followed was heavier than before. Mom's voice trembled. Richard, what did you do? He turned to her, his composure cracking. I don't know. Victoria threw up her hands. This is madness. We're being blacklisted because of a company that doesn't even exist. Every empire looks stable until the foundations shift, I murmured. Victoria spun toward me. Oh, stop with your fortune cookie wisdom. You act like you're above all this, but this is our family. I met her eyes. Exactly. Dad leaned across the table, his voice low, controlled. Brittany, you're holding something back. You know who they are. I paused, letting the silence stretch until even the chandelier seemed to hum with tension. Then I said softly, Maybe I do. Thomas turned his laptop toward us. Dad, look at this. The registration records for Pacific Northwest Ventures lead to a parent firm called Pacific Strategies LLC, but the registered address is, he hesitated, a Seattle location, a co-working space. Dad frowned. Seattle? I smiled faintly. That's my city. Marcus's eyes widened. No way. Brittany, are you saying you... I lifted a hand, cutting him off. I'm saying nothing. Yet. The chandelier above us trembled slightly, as if responding to the tension rising in the room. Dad's jaw tightened. Who are you really working for, Brittany? I met his stare calmly. You'll find out soon enough. And for the first time in my life, my father, the man who never feared anyone, looked at me like I was someone he didn't recognize. The sound of my heels against the marble floor echoed in the silence that followed. I moved around the table slowly, almost deliberately, while my family watched like a jury that already feared the verdict. Brittany. Dad said, his voice hoarse enough riddles. If you know something, you need to tell us now. I stopped beside him, close enough to see the faint tremor in his hand as he gripped the back of his chair. You want the truth, I asked. Yes, he said firmly, all of it. I unlocked my phone and opened an email thread. Check your inbox. He frowned, taking his phone. What is this? Open it. The room filled with the faint buzz of phones vibrating. One by one, their screens lit up with the same subject line. Pacific Northwest Ventures, LLC, ownership and portfolio summary. I watched their faces as they read. First confusion, then disbelief. Then the dawning devastating realization. Mom's hand went to her mouth. No, this can't be. Marcus's voice cracked. Primary shareholder, Brittany Anderson. Thomas blinked at his screen. Total assets, $847 million. Victoria was the last to react. Her wine glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. The sound rang out like punctuation to the silence that followed. Dad's lips parted, but no words came. His voice, when it finally returned, was barely a whisper. You're Pacific Northwest Ventures. I am, I said quietly. The weight of it settled over the table like fog. Victoria shook her head, almost laughing. That's impossible. You make apps. I made apps, I corrected. Then I made investments. Smart ones. Strategic ones. I moved to the head of the table and sat down his seat the first time I'd ever dared to. I started with $50 million in seed capital. Real estate. Tech startups. Manufacturing facilities. Every decision was deliberate. Every acquisition calculated. Dad's knuckles whitened against the edge of the table. 800 million? 847, I said. Give or take. Mom looked like she might faint. All these years. You were the investor backing us. For 5 years, I said. Every expansion, every property acquisition. You were celebrating my money last night without even realizing it. Marcus stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Why would you do that? Why hide it? Because I said I wanted to see if you'd ever treat me like I belonged, without knowing I was the one holding you up. They all stared at me, stunned. I glanced at Victoria. You called my money pocket change. My gaze shifted to Dad. You said I didn't understand serious business. I leaned forward, my voice steady. But it turns out the entire empire you built, the one you used to measure everyone else's worth, was standing on my investment. I was your silent partner, your invisible backbone, the little sister you laughed at while spending her capital. Victoria's jaw tightened. You think this is funny? No, I said softly. I think it's poetic. Thomas exhaled shakily. You pulled the funding. You destroyed us. I did, I admitted, because last night you made one thing very clear. I don't belong here. So I decided to show you what that looks like when the balance of power changes. Dad's voice broke through the tension like thunder. You sabotaged your own family. I corrected an imbalance, I replied. 5 years of loyalty bought me mockery. 5 years of silence bought me invisibility. So I reminded you who really owns what you built. He slammed his fist on the table. You've ruined us. I didn't flinch. No, I revealed you. For a moment, the only sound was the faint hum of the chandelier above us. Then Mom whispered, Brittany, why didn't you tell us? I turned to her. Would it have mattered? Would you have believed me if I said I was capable of what you all dismissed me for? Her lips trembled. We didn't mean to. You did, I said gently. Every time you smiled and told me my success was cute. Every time you laughed when I offered to help. Every time you made me the family's afterthought. Victoria crossed her arms, voice brittle. So what now? You came here to gloat. No, I said standing. I came here to make a choice. Dad's voice softened for the first time that night. A choice. I looked at him. Really looked at him. The man who had built an empire from nothing, but had never seen his daughter as more than a shadow. You said Anderson Holdings was a family business. You were right. It's time to make it one. Thomas blinked. You're offering to come back. I'm offering to restore your funding $200 million this time. They all froze. But I continued. There are conditions. Marcus groaned. Of course there are. I want a seat on the board, I said. Full voting rights. Full transparency on all investments and expenditures. And I want respect, real respect, not the kind you wrap in sarcasm. Dad stared at me silent. And if we say no, Victoria asked quietly. Then I withdraw every remaining investment linked to Anderson Holdings, I said. The Morrison Building, the Riverside Complex, the Harborview Apartments, all of it. I have controlling or significant interest in every major property. It would take me a week to dismantle what you've spent decades building. The words hit like gunfire, but I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. Power speaks in quiet tones. Mom's eyes filled with tears. Brittany, please, don't do this. I looked at her, and for a moment I almost faltered. Almost. Then don't make me. Dad took a long, slow breath, his gaze locked on mine. You've made your point. Have I asked softly. He looked down at the email again at the numbers beside my name. When he finally met my eyes, there was no anger, only something else. Recognition, maybe, or regret. He stood, walked around the table, and stopped in front of me. His voice was low, but steady. I underestimated you. I shouldn't have. You earned this, all of it. For what specifically, I asked. For building something even I can't control. His words were both confession and surrender. Mom stood next, tears streaking her face. Brittany, we're sorry. I nodded. I know. Thomas cleared his throat. For what it's worth, I think a board seat's fair. I vote yes. Marcus hesitated, then nodded. Same. We need you. Victoria was the last to speak. Her tone was softer than I'd ever heard it. You really control 800 million. 847, I corrected. She gave a small, incredulous laugh. You're terrifying. Thank you, I said. Dad extended his hand. Partners. I looked at it for a long moment, then took it. Partners, I said. But this time we do it my way. The faint buzz of my phone broke the silence. A message from David. Restore full funding. I typed back. Yes, all of it. Plus 20 million more. Time to show them what serious money looks like. When I looked up, my family was still staring at me. Part awe, part fear, part something resembling respect. For the first time, I felt like I actually belonged at that table. For a long, fragile moment, none of us spoke. The chandelier's crystals swayed gently, scattering fractured light across the table, like fragments of our old life. The power dynamic had flipped completely, the empire builder, now sitting in silence while his daughter negotiated its survival. Dad finally exhaled, the sound rough, almost human. We'll draft the paperwork immediately, he said. You'll have a board seat, voting rights, and full transparency. No objections. Mom's trembling hand reached toward me. Brittany, sweetheart. This doesn't have to be a war. We were wrong about everything. I just want my family back. I stared at her for a moment, the ache beneath my stern composure flickering like a candle. So do I said quietly. But it has to be different this time. Marcus leaned forward, elbows on the table. Different how? Different, I said, means no more mockery when I speak. No more decisions made behind closed doors. If I'm restoring $200 million in funding, I have the right to steer the direction of this company. Victoria gave a sharp, humorless laugh. You mean control it? Control it, I agreed, before it crashes again. Dad rubbed the back of his neck, weary. Brittany, I don't care what it takes. You're right. You deserve respect and authority. I watched him carefully. It wasn't the words I was measuring, it was the tone. For once, Richard Anderson wasn't speaking as a man issuing an order. He was negotiating from weakness. That, more than any apology, was the real shift. I nodded slowly. Then we have an agreement. Thomas typed something into his laptop. I'll email the legal team to prepare the paperwork for her board appointment. Make sure it's official, I said. Voting rights, oversight, audit, access, everything in writing. He nodded. Done. For the first time in the family's history, no one interrupted me. When my phone buzzed again, I excused myself and stepped into the hallway. David's name glowed on the screen. Everything in place, I asked quietly. Exactly as planned, he said. Anderson Holdings stock is beginning to stabilize. Restoring the capital will look like confidence in the market. By morning, the headlines will call it a strategic reinvestment. Good, I murmured. And the additional $20 million. Already moving, he replied. You're officially the largest private investor in the company by a wide margin. I smiled faintly. Perfect. When I returned to the dining room, the energy had changed. The arrogance that once filled the air had evaporated, replaced by something quieter, respect maybe, or fear. Dad was seated again, his posture less rigid. You know, he said, looking at me across the table, I spent 30 years building this company. But I never realized I was raising someone who could outbuild me. You weren't raising me, I said gently. You were training me. You just didn't know it. He gave a slow nod. You're right. Mom's voice trembled. Brittany, can you ever forgive us? I studied her face, the perfect mask of elegance now cracked and human. I already have, I said. But forgiveness doesn't erase memory. Tears slid down her cheeks. I understand. Victoria looked between us, arms folded. Her usual defiance softened by something almost like admiration. You know, she said, when you offered that $300,000, I thought you were being naive. Turns out you were testing us. I was, I said, and you all failed spectacularly. That made her smile, just a little. Touché. Marcus raised his glass, half smiling. To Brittany, the ghost investor who turned out to be our savior. Dad lifted his own glass. To new beginnings. Mom whispered to family. I hesitated for a heartbeat, then raised mine too. To truth, I said softly. Our glasses clinked. The sound was delicate, but it carried finality, the closing of one chapter and the uncomfortable beginning of another. Later that night, I stood alone outside on the balcony overlooking the estate grounds. The air was cool and sharp, filled with the hum of distant traffic. Through the window behind me, I could see them still talking, my family smaller, somehow almost fragile in their reconciliation. The phone in my hand buzzed again. David's message appeared. Funding restored. Legal documents prepared. You're officially seated as board director of Anderson Holdings. Congratulations. I typed back. Thank you. And David, close the side accounts. No more secrets, not even for me. Understood, he replied. I slipped the phone into my coat pocket and let the silence wash over me. For years, I'd thought revenge would feel like triumph. But standing there, I realized it felt more like peace. A calm that came not from winning, but from no longer needing to prove anything. I turned back toward the window one last time. Inside, Dad was laughing an uncertain, awkward sound, as if he'd forgotten how. Mom's hand rested lightly on his. Marcus and Thomas were talking about projections, Victoria tapping on her phone, likely drafting a statement for the press. They looked almost human again. I smiled faintly. Maybe power didn't just corrupt, it revealed. And tonight it revealed who we all really were. As I walked toward the driveway, my phone buzzed once more. A text from Dad. I'm proud of you, Brittany. Truly, I should have said that years ago. I stopped beside my car, reading the words twice before replying. See you at the board meeting, Dad. The engine purred to life, the headlights cutting through the darkness. As the mansion faded in my rearview mirror, I thought of the night before, the laughter, the mockery, the condescension, and how quickly all of it had dissolved when the lights of power shifted. They once told me I was playing in the kiddie pool. But the truth was, I'd built the ocean they were drowning in. And now, whether they realized it or not, they'd be learning to swim in my waters. Sometimes revenge isn't about destruction. It's about rewriting the story until they finally learn who the author has always been.